Thank you so much for coming out on this Tuesday night. We have a very special presentation tonight with Josh Cutler. Josh Cutler is a PhD student in Holocaust Studies at Gratz College. He holds a master's degree in Holocaust and Genocide Studies from Stockton University. His book, The 70 Shuls, Synagogue Life and Yiddishkeit from, did I say that?
Yeah, very good.
From the Pine Barrens to the Boardwalk. He did bring copies of his book. It's his new book. Highlights Jewish life in South Jersey with a special focus on Vineland and the surrounding area. Josh brings extensive experience in Jewish communal leadership, having served as program director at the Catch Jewish Community Center, camp director of JCC Camp by the Sea, and executive director of the Board of Jewish Education of Atlantic and Cape May counties. Josh is passionate about preserving and sharing Jewish history, especially the stories of local communities and the people who built them. Let's welcome Josh.
Thank you, everyone. Testing 1, 2. Okay. Anyways, so shalom, welcome. As we just heard, my name is Josh Cutler, and later I'll talk about my book. But in the meantime, we are here tonight to learn about an important chapter in Jewish history, specifically the Jewish roots of Vineland. And I am going to do my best for the next 40 minutes or so. As we heard, I was a former camp director, so I'm going to do my best to keep you guys awake, alert, into it, and bring that ruach, that energy to the program. So we'll get started. Okay. So what we see here is just for the opening map is basically the area we're going to be talking about to the right there. It's not only Vineland, because Vineland has what I'll say is a prequel. It didn't just pop up as a Jewish community. It actually emanated from the overflow of Alliance, Norma, and even Rosenbein. We can stay there, that's fine.
Ooh.
So don't go forward yet. All right, we'll get the rhythm. Anyway, so what we see here is actually a map of Cumberland County, 1872. And it was actually established as a county since 1748. And industries of this area focused on agriculture, glass manufacturing, maritime industries down along the Delaware River, and oystering, river trade, etc. This is before the Jewish community arrived. So what I'm getting at is that Vineland was fairly well established prior to any Jewish individuals arriving in the town. So a little bit about Cumberland County, which you might know. Bridgeton served as the county seat and main administrative center. It's over to the left. Millville was a major industrial hub, especially for glassmaking. And Vineland, founded in 1861, was a rapidly growing agricultural and civic community. And I just learned this tonight about Charles Landis, basically that he wanted to create an area in South Jersey that was an agrarian, farming, utopian society. It was very ambitious. He was a forward thinker, maybe. And he actually would give out, or I would say lease out at a very reduced rate, land as long as people would grow grapes, with that idea that he was creating this larger picture. It was very particular that the people living on his land or extended land where manufacturing grapes did not drink alcohol. This was a little while, many years ago. So that was one of the, but he was focusing more on grape juice, raisins, and so on and so forth. So this is some of the early industry that was set up before the Jewish people arrived in the town. As you might know, Landis, it was originally called Landis Township, and it included the area that would later be known as Vineland. So later on in 1952, the Landis Township and the Vineland Borough merged, and it became the city of Vineland, which is the largest city by geographic area in New Jersey. I did the math today, 68.4 square miles. It's enormous. Even on a map, it looks like it's its own county, even though it's a city. Anyways, let's go to the next slide, please. There we go, we got fancy.
Yeah.
Anyways, so a settlement is born, and these are some articles from 1862. And the town was named for what we call viticulture, grape growing, wine population. And he chose the name Vineland to reflect this vision of a land centered on, again, farming and vineyards. And what we see here is a couple really cool articles from the 1860s. I'll just read it briefly. A new settlement to be called Vineland has been projected on the Glassboro Millville Railroad in South Jersey. 20,000 acres of land have been divided into farms of 20 acres or more, which is sold to actual settlers, I guess, at 10 to 15, I'm sorry, from 15 to $20 per acre. The place is about 30 miles from Philadelphia. So still it's being established, but Philadelphia is ultimately the headliner here in this article. I'm going to actually leave the mic to come over and read this. Hang in there. Here we go. I know. Whoa, watch you go. So I'm going to do my best to read this. This is actually a poem from the Bridgeview Pioneer. I'm not going to read it all, but it's just an idea. Invitation to Vineland. Come to Vineland. Come to Vineland from the city's stifled air, from the snowy northern mountains, from the old farm, worn and bare. Come away from New England, come to from the far northwest, where like the chains of winter, blind and slavery nature's breast. I don't know. It was the 1860s, so there was a lot of stuff going on, but it was basically the idea that this was an article welcoming people to Vineland, an article like a poem, and the next to the citizens of Vineland, almost a play by a letter on how to make sure that the new people coming into town were planning correctly and able to not miss that harvest that would cause them great issues down the line. So next slide, please. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, again, this was happening before the Jewish arrival. We're talking about the 1860s, 1870s, the fruit of the earth here. We're talking side by side. These individuals, they coax berries, sweet potatoes, asparagus, grapes, and other crops from the land, selling their harvest and building their lives rooted in resilience. Next slide, please. There we go. You can see here some of the famous crops that we know of, whether it be, obviously, we're quite famous for blueberries down here in South Jersey, cherries. They had to adapt to the land. The land was not going to adapt to them. As you know, if you've ever been camping in the Pine Barrens, it's not exactly the most earthy, fertile soil. There's a lot of sand mixed in with that loam. So they had to adjust anything they might have learned in England or for Germany or wherever they were coming from. They had to adjust to where they were living now. Next slide, please. So this is actually kind of where our story starts for the Jewish story of Vineland. And you might be saying, why are we talking about Gala settlement, Western, what we call now Western Russia? This is basically where the story of the Vineland Jews begins. It was established in 1791 by Catherine the Great of Russia. And within this area, Jews were restricted to land ownership and living and the way they could practice their religion. When we hear about shtetls, a lot of them were in this area. It's basically what is now Eastern Poland, as well as Moldova, Ukraine, Belarus, etc. And what really, if you want to just click one time. There we go. What we're really focusing on here is not the early years, the 1700s, but the 1880s. Okay, they had a new czar, right? Congratulations, welcome to the job, and it became horrible for the Jews. Pogroms were not just tolerated; they were basically nationalized. It became part of the job of the police and the public to take care of the Jews, to rape, to pillage, to steal, to treat them as second-class citizens. It was a horrible time to be a Jew in 1880s Pale settlement, which was Russia. Basically, its intensity built up where these Jews found it more productive to head west into Western Europe, where they were received but not necessarily wanted. And then they learned from there. They got on a lot of boats and headed into New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia harbor. At this point, this is before Ellis Island, so a lot of them landed in what's known as Castle Rock, which was, I guess, near that area. But we'll talk about Castle Rock a little later. You'll see a picture of it probably. Next slide, please. All right, so this is actually a picture of it's one of the outlying towns. Again, the story of Jewish Vineland doesn't start in Vineland, it starts on the outskirts. Norma, Brockmanville, Alliance, and here, this is actually a picture of Rosenheim. And the Jewish story of Vineland kind of began as like a ripple effect, an overflow from Salem County, from Alliance County, neighboring settlements in the 1880s and 1890s. Individuals were growing vegetables and harvesting their first crops. And the Bradway station in Norma, which was changed later to Norma Station, was their link to the larger railway station in Vineland. And life and city and Americanization, all these new things were coming at them from Vineland. And again, in the 1890s, unlike Alliance, which was basically the woods, it was the sticks of New Jersey and was created from the ground up as a Jewish colony. Vineland instead, as well as Rosenheim, was already established by Italians, Germans, Quakers, Lenape, and black farmers by the time the Jews arrived. But again, at first there was a buildup and then an overflow into Vineland. So next slide, please. Okay, this is a quote from the Teach Them Diligently Unto Your Children, and some of you might recognize. But Vineland was different than the Alliance and the Woodbine Colony, which is important but not entirely part of this specific story. It had to begin basically, the Jews arrived, as I mentioned. Sorry, I lost my train here. Sorry. They were exposed through Vineland to different walks of life. A flow of commerce, people, and ideas from big cities were connected to these rural agrarian societies. And pretty soon, by the 20th century, plows gave rise to punch clocks. Okay, agrarian dreams yielded to urbanization and ultimately industrial development. Factories started to replace farms. Jewish families branched out from Vineland in search of work beyond the shop counters or running small family businesses. Through it all, the farms remained active, but people realized that they needed to diversify in order to be able to create a living. Hence the rise of the industrial age in South Jersey. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about industry. We talked about the grape juice. The Welch's grape juice in Vineland, New Jersey, had quite a presence here in the 1860s. I guess the upper left was the Alvine canning factory, which was a big deal. Canning revolutionized farming as much as the cotton gin. People were able to not only protect their food from expiring, they enabled them to have a longer shelf life, to be able to package it and sell it on the trains in the larger cities. So the Alvine Canning Company opened up, which based by Maurice Fells, by the way, and was able to provide a service for these new farmers on the outskirts of Vineland. On the bottom left, it's a box of cigars. One of the people that was huge one of the original Jewish pioneers of this area, Moses Bega. I hope maybe you might have heard of him. He ended up making a great amount of money selling cigars that later he sold. But before that, they turned it into Bay Up Phillies, and then Philly cigars and Philly blunts, and they are still in business, and their factories enormous. But he sold it. Unfortunately, it doesn't belong to the family currently, to the best of my knowledge. But anyways, so these are just some of the bigger industries that started coming out of Vineland as the Jewish population started in influx. Next slide, please. So Jewish agrarianism, Jewish farming communities, where sounds maybe if you never heard of it, you're not from Vineland, it sounds crazy to some people. Be like, Jewish farmers? What? That doesn't. No, and Jewish farmers in New Jersey? Now you're crazy. But it was a whole industry that not only magazines like this, the Jewish Farmer, magazine, which was published by the Jewish Agricultural Society in early 1900s. They promoted these agricultural settlements, offered practical farming advice, shared success stories, and made these farmers that in these pockets of land around the country realize that they were not alone. They were part of this bigger push for the Jewish farmers. Now I'm going to rewind a little bit. Okay, one of the catalysts behind Jewish farmers was a concept. It was a belief, a philosophy called Am Olam, the eternal people, which is born in the Pale settlement in Odessa specifically, where individuals would believe they would get closer to the land and become farmers, much like biblical Jewish heroes. Think of King David, the shepherd. Oh, not yet. King David, the shepherd, or Noah, who was one of the first vineyard that we have in the Torah. These were core concepts of Jewish farmers that basically they would provide individuals from Russia a chance to start farms in America. Were they really excited about Jewish agrarianism and the ability to live out this dream? Probably not. Most were just happy to get away from the Tsar's Russia and to be in a place that didn't want them dead. So, but anyways, this Am Olam movement inspired not only in South Jersey, but this larger movement of Jewish agrarianism. And the Jewish Vacation Guide is something interesting as well. It's basically a guide that was distributed by the Federation of Jewish Farmers of America for Jewish travelers. So they knew that where they were going was safe, whether it was Jews were accepted there. For instance, Atlantic City, yes, while for the most part in between, nope. So they had to know that in advance, and places they could find kosher food and boarding houses that were accepting to Jewish travelers. So this is the way in the early 1900s, not only in Vineland, which was a major force behind a lot of these initiatives, was able to connect to a larger society. So next, please. Okay, so one of the things that cannot be understated is the train lines that crisscross all over South Jersey and ultimately formed the beginnings of the ability for these individuals to not only become Jewish farmers but sell their wares. They weren't just feeding their families; they were collecting enough money to improve their livelihood. So what we're seeing here on the right is an early map of some of the early train stations and train lines, where you can see these communities in Vineland and the surrounding areas in the upper left were ultimately connected by train lines. Alliance and Broughtonville, not so much, but Norma was the central place. Now, and some of you might know how Norma got its name. If not, it's a fun story. Yeah, okay. You can go for it, yeah. Oh, cool. That it's somewhere. What I learned was it was the individual who operated the train. The train station was also a one-man show. He also did the post office, and they had to change the post office name also because it overlapped with another Bradway. And his daughter or niece or whatever it was Norma, and 150 years later, we're still calling it Norma. It's just a cool little small town story. Anyways, the train lines here, as you can see, this is Landis Station in the bottom left. The way that Norma and Rosamine, the early Jewish communities, would connect to Vineland. And those trains also brought in culture, whether it be Yiddish theater into town, whether it be visiting rabbis to expand the Jewish philosophy and the ideas beyond their usual Friday night and Saturday morning and the morning meeting services, the minions. So that's what was going on here. Next slide, please. So, alrighty. So with this influx of Jews into Vineland area, Mazel Tov, a shul is born. And of course, in true Jewish fashions, one Jew, two opinions, one community, two shuls, two synagogues.
I'll get into the details of how that happened because it's a little foggy and buried in the sands of time. But basically, I did the research here that in 1901, there was about 3,500 Jews living in Vineland and the extended community, which is surprisingly only had 2 synagogues. But there were other ones, again, in Alliance and Rockville, Norma, but in here specifically, we had, and you could read the article here. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I'll say the Hebrews of the town are becoming Americanized enough to divide into factions, the same as Americans do. So I thought that was kind of cool. Like that was the way a Gentile mind saw the division of these 2 Jewish communities. And the second one, the new church, the Hebrew society, it was formally connected. Anyways, the idea that they called it a church, I thought was interesting. And the idea that they split into 2 and made the paper, the Evening Journal in 1905. But of course, that is the way we've always been. That's how we got 70 shuls instead of 7 shuls in the end. So next slide, please. So their names, one more time, it's okay, was the Grape Street Shul and Plum Street Shul. So clever. And I'll give you one guess. Which streets do you think they were on? And this is before there was big donors, when you can say it's the Levinson Synagogue. It was simplistic. It was easy to find. These were simple people. They were mostly agrarian farmers in the early 1900s. Again, some shopkeepers, merchants, etc. But let's flip to the next slide. We'll get to take a look at these 2 shuls eventually. Here we go. So the Grape Street Shul. Some of this is still there. And I promised Mike that I would give a plug. They still have Minyan almost, if not every day, almost every day. It's still active. It's the only Orthodox shul that is active in Vineland today. You're my witness. I did my commercial. I promised them I'd do that. Anyways, Sons of Jacob, which was later named Sons of Children of Jacob, later Sons of Jacob, was actually some interesting fun facts about it. On the bottom corner here, there's a plaque. It's copper and it's really beautiful. It's actually still on the top of the synagogue in the upper right there, above the doors. That plaque thanks the Cutler family, Lazar Cutler and Lisa Cutler, who donated this original building, which was a former German church. They were philanthropists back in the day, the Cutler family, and they donated this to the congregation with the idea that it was going to bring both these factions together that were having issues under one roof and reunite the Jewish community. 130 years later, that still didn't happen, but their intentions were really good, and he donated it with the idea that with $2,000 to kind of to renovate, that they would put this memorial plaque over the door, and it's still there to this day. A little weathered, but the plaque, it's a quiet tribute to idealism and generosity. And then again, the groups never unified. And over time, occasionally they did share rabbis. And the rabbis would have to plan where they would be at this synagogue, maybe for the 11 o'clock Kiddush, and then hop over to Chavas Achim, which is the other synagogue, for the 1 o'clock. So they did work in tandem. At one point, I found when one was being under construction, they did share. They weren't against each other. They just had a different philosophy of Judaism. So next slide, please. So anyway, these are some slides from Beth Jacob through the years. Again, a close-up of the plaque dedicated to the Cutler family, and some of their beautiful stained glass, which was donated to various individuals in the community. Next slide, please. There we go. This is just some pictures of the interior as well. They did have a school next to the synagogue, which was their Hebrew school, which was actually not the original building. The original was torn down in the 50s, probably early 50s, I would say, and it was constructed, I want to say, 58 and opened. The new school, because in the 50s, I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, I will say there was a huge influx of Jewish individuals to Vineland coming over from Europe. So they rose to the occasion. Anyways, we'll get to that in a little bit. Sons of Jacob, Grape Street School. Go on to the next slide, please. And of course, like I said, one Jewish community, 2 synagogues. This was the second synagogue. It was over on 525 Plum Street. It is no longer there now. It looks like a house has taken its place and still has some of the foundation, but you wouldn't be able to tell it's the same building. This was the more the more orthodox of the two shuls. Okay, in fact, they would always differentiate themselves with the synagogue that would read out page numbers and tell them when we're on page 43 was not orthodox enough. People should know what page they're on. So that sometimes that was a dividing factor, and they each catered to their own niche. This was such an orthodox synagogue that they actually they were open according to their bylaws. Next slide, please. We'll come to the back this one. Their bylaws, basically, go one more. We'll come back here. There we go. Their bylaws, and this is their articles of incorporation. Basically stated they were open to Sabbath observing Jews, God-fearing Jews, people that were extremely dedicated to Kashrut, Judaism, and they even eventually outgrew the practice of fining members 50 cents for missing services. And 50 cents back in 1906, and they were in a temporary quarters at that time. This building was actually, I want to say, created and constructed between 1909 and 1912. It took them a little longer for whatever reasons. Next slide, please. Okay, so basically in the early 1900s and 1910s, farm life in Vineland reflected both optimism and the hardship that many people and Jewish immigrant families went through. We started to see the first generation of what I'll say is American-born Jews coming into their own, but it was still kind of reminiscent of a shtetl in the pines. Many of the individuals operated small farms, vineyards, truck farms where they sold stuff out of the back of a pickup truck or out of the back of a carriage held by a horse. They worked long hours. Entire families were committed, contributed to the planning, harvesting, marketing, etc. It was this whole Jewish agricultural experiment was supported by other Jewish organizations. You might have heard of HIAS, a Hebrew Immigrant Association Society, HIAS, HEAS, JAS, Jewish Agricultural Society, Baron Hirsch. There was Israel Atlantique, there was Alliance, there was several European foundations that were helping support many of these Jewish families. Poor soil, though, in many areas, fluctuating markets, and the growing influx of urban industrial jobs made the 1910s a turning point between agrarian idealism and the shift towards city life. And I found that the population, Jewish population, again in 1901, 3,500, by 1919, 2,700. So still substantial, but it hit its peak and was coming down a little bit. Next slide, please. All right. This is a slide from I want it to be early 2023, the Vineland Hebrew Civic Club. And this actually is what I'll say is the beginnings right here of the third synagogue in the mix, which came in the 1920s, Beth Israel. Before it was Orthodox or more Orthodox. Those are the options. Times were changing in America. Individuals were seeing how Jewish individuals were seeing how churches were run. Men and women were sitting next to each other. There was more singing, and prayers were in English. And this group was the foundation of the next the American-born Jews that started Beth Israel. Basically, again, as synagogue members, these farms took up a lot of space. And these individuals found they can't walk the synagogue anymore on holidays. And so they had to figure out a way of getting there and even driving, God forbid. But they did, and it was the way it worked. Originally, Jewish families had to live within walking distance of a synagogue because they had to walk there for Shabbat. Now, in the 1920s, Yiddishkeit, once firmly rooted in the soil next to the shul, was uprooted and given a chance to flourish across Vineland in an entirely different way. So let's go to see how conservative Judaism moves along here. Oh, well, one in between slide. This is, you know what that is. We'll click to the next one. Well, there you Okay, so this, you might have known Beth Israel, what you know Beth Israel looks like, but it wasn't always in that location. Vineland's first conservative synagogue was officially opened in 1924, and it was a converted church building that featured a large arch ceiling, and the builders opted not to build a balcony. So far, all the synagogues had a place for the men to pray below and the women to pray in the upper balcony. They were going for a different look, a different feeling of conservative Judaism, where they embraced mixed seating. Again, following trends that the American-born Jews had seen in churches. This became very popular very quick in 1924, and then all of a sudden, by the 1940s, they realized they'd already outgrown their building. So next slide. So stay there. This is what you probably know Beth Israel as now. This is the front or the back, depending on how you look at it, of Beth Israel. It's got some incredible stained glass. We'll get to that later. Next slide, please. There we go. All right, so as I was saying, it became really, really packed. This is the Hebrew school. I don't know how these kids learned anything. I didn't have trouble in my day, and we had like 12 kids in our school. I was on 7th Avenue in Elmer, so it wasn't too far from here, the original building. And in the 1950s, they eventually realized they outgrew this, and they had, again, that huge influx of Jews coming in after the war that were looking for a place to settle. So next page. Okay, so we're now into the 1930s, and these are just some articles I put out here, just so you can see that it wasn't just farming and synagogue. Like, there was a real Jewish culture here. You see here, just glancing here, a gala picnic, Jewish war vets, individuals at this point probably from World War I, were forming a community together, getting to know each other. They're suffering through the Depression together, and even a Jewish play with an all-star cast here at the American Legion Hall. It's as American as you get. Getzel Wants a Bride. I don't know if that's ever going to be made into a movie with Brad Pitt, maybe Gal Gadot, Salma Hayek, who knows. Anyways, next slide, please. Again, and there was changes that were happening at this time, rapid changes in Judaism. Imagine again, not only was conservative Judaism now interspersed with Vineland proper, the people were also to some extent unaffiliating and becoming a little less religious overall. Here are just some of the things that were happening in town. A merchant who was in Germany said that it's not the way it is. Whatever you're reading on the news is not the truth. He reported back to Vineland. The bread price here jumps by 1 cent. It might not be a big deal, but the local bread operators were raising their price by 1 cent, and then the Jewish bakers, the kosher bakers, had to consider: are we going to do this too? So Jewish Youth Conference held, and some Jewish marriage laws that had changed under the auspices of conservative Judaism that kind of made them more accepting of whatever was happening in Judaism at the time. Divorces, intermarriage, things started to happen that didn't overlap with what the older set was used to. Next slide, please. All right, cool. Again, 1930s, not only in Vineland, but across the world. So many horrible things were happening to Jews in Europe. And these are actually just some articles from the Daily Journal in Vineland to kind of show that the Jews here living in Vineland were connected to this larger story happening in Europe. It wasn't like we didn't know. This is 1933, and they knew what was going on. There was politics and layers of politics involved, stopping the United States from action. But I do truly believe, based not only on these articles, but the Jewish cartoons that I've studied from the 1930s through 1950s, the undertones of the cartoons, the nuances, what they're conveying, and we knew. So basically, just a connection to the larger world here. Next slide. And we know what happened in the 1930s into the 1940s, the Shoah. And as a PhD student in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, I have to take a moment just to talk about the enormity of what this was for European Jewry and American Jewry that ripples through today. So, and I'll say the Holocaust was not a single eruption of violence. It was a systematic collapse of moral order carried out through law, bureaucracy, and the participation of ordinary institutions and it unfolded gradually, isolating Jews from society, stripping them of their rights, their dignity, and ultimately life, while much of the world hesitated or looked away. By the time the mass murder was undeniable, millions had already been erased, along with their families, their communities, and cultures that could never be restored. What remains of this destruction is the obligation of all of us to always remember and never forget, and look after their stories with honesty and care. So that was just my soapbox for a second. Let's go next slide, please. So, as many people initially studying history don't realize, maybe, when 1945, it was dead, the Japanese surrendered. It's not like it was just like, whew, that was rough. There was years upon years of transition. All of these individuals coming out of concentration camps were malnourished, they were sick, they were lice infested, some of them pregnant, some of them better shape than others, partisans coming out of the woods from their guerrilla warfare that they were doing on the Nazis. And basically the next stage, before they came, these individuals, these survivors, before they came to the Vineland area, many, if not, I'll say most, if not many, spent several years, usually through 48, most of them, in Europe's DP camp, displaced persons camps. And this was the prequel to before they came to Vineland. Many individuals, they reconnected with their families there. They got to they met their spouses. Babies were born. Maybe even people in this room might have been born in DP camps. It was an incredible era that is often overlooked. But they didn't stay there for long. They weren't meant to stay there for long. It wasn't the Holiday Inn, but it was leaps and bounds and so much better than what they were suffering years prior. Next slide, please. So from the displaced persons camp to Vineland, New Jersey, when they were liberated and they first stepped on American soil, some of the trauma that they had followed them into their new lives in ways that were subtle but enduring. And by this memory lived with many of them throughout their entire lives. But they were in a land of freedom right now, and Jewish life continued in modest synagogues, borrowed rooms, amongst chicken farms, where faith was practiced not as defiance, but as continuity, to connect to something much larger. Now, next slide, please. All right, cool. So I'm going to start talking about some families that you might know from name. This is the Mayerfeld family. And this is actually one of the earliest, what I'll call a synagogue. What is a synagogue? What makes a synagogue? Is it that there's a Torah? Because it definitely had a Torah. It had one that was saved from Nazi Germany on its property. But it was basically what we call now an Airbnb, a rooming house. And the Mayerfelds would rent out rooms to Jews that would come down from Philly, or New York, or DC to vacation in Vineland. And why? Well, first off, there was no airplane travel, really, or not mass airplane travel. It wasn't accessible, and they called them pleasure nicks. Individuals that would come down, wake up to the sounds of chickens, and go to the lake and Nora Beach, which I'm sure many of you remember or know. And this individual used it as a chance to have his home as a place where all the local Orthodox Jews would walk to his home, and then he would have a rotating group of half dozen individuals of Jews that were staying with him that would be part of the regular Minyan and the Torah service. Is this a synagogue? It's in my book. It's one of the 70. So I say yes. This was, they knew they didn't have a full-time rabbi. They had the mezuzah. They had the minyan. They did services. They ate Passover meals. It was a unique type of synagogue that I refer to as a Holocaust survivor shul. We know what Reform synagogues look like. We know what conservative, we know egalitarian, but this is its own category. That's basically the core of my thesis, that these are its own unique Holocaust survivor schools, synagogues by Holocaust survivors for Holocaust survivors. Because why? One, they lived out in these farms in the called the boonies. They couldn't walk 3-4 miles to Sons of Jacob or whatever. And also, a lot of them didn't feel accepted into the established Jewish synagogues, whether it be the more liberal Beth Israel or the more conservative Ahavas Achim. There was something about them showing up in their overalls, barely speaking English, having a whole different minhag, a whole different way of praying. They just didn't feel right. Square peg, ground hole. Still saying they're all shapes, but it just didn't work. So a number of these types of synagogues popped up, including this one, the Shibboleth. Next one, please. Okay, so along all this in the 1930s and 1940s came the rise of the Jewish poultry farming industry. And I have a couple of just newspaper clips here from '51 about memorial services for Nazi victims. And you'll notice it doesn't even use the word Holocaust. It wasn't really commonplace. And even people kind of hesitated, even if it was to even say the word. It didn't have the same, it wasn't as popular and well known as it is today. It really had its peak much later in history. But the survivors, a lot of them formed these poultry organizations, associations, and it became a real industry where they would meet and have Jewish poultry meetings and concerts and dinners and galas. I mean, it was an amazing subculture that was run by some amazing leaders that we'll talk about in a minute. The one thing, next slide, please. Sorry. There we go. We get the chicken there staring at you in the face. But in the corner here, we're going to see one of the most popular chicken farmers, and I hope many of you have at least heard of him, is Miles Lerman. And I hope you have, because we're going to focus on him in a little bit, because I was always told that it's great, numbers and dates and addresses are really cool, but what really gets people is these human stories. So we're going to touch on his story, Esther Rob's story, we just talked about Mayerfeld, and a couple others. So before we go on, there were multiple layers of settlement into Vineland of Jews coming to the area after the Holocaust. There was first the Germans, the individuals that got out of there early, that came to Vineland, set up their chicken farms as best they could, went against all odds, were not well liked by the neighbors particularly, found their little niche, wedged in there and fought all they could, save their money, okay? And come mid-1940s, all of a sudden, Eastern Europeans now, so gradually much more, a larger amount of Eastern Europeans, Russian-speaking, Yiddish-speaking, more Orthodox, a little rough around the edges, a little more weathered. They had most of them PTSD, which was then called survivor syndrome. And the German Jews that were established there early didn't necessarily like or communicate or get along with the later arriving Jews from Eastern Europe. Maybe there's lots of thoughts why. Maybe one theory I have is that think of you yourself working 12 years to pay off your mortgage, and all of a sudden someone comes in and they get to start on year 12. Like, whoa, what's that all about? It's probably similar. There was a lot of aid coming in, Jewish Agricultural Society, and so on and so forth, to help a lot of these individuals after World War II get resettled in the area. Now, I will say that there's synagogues between the German Jews and the Russian Eastern European Jews where they were so close that there was literally a farm and a chicken coop between the two. That's how close you could hear the shofar blast from one synagogue to the other. Individuals on Shabbat would walk past each other in the street, whether it be a Russian passing a German, and you know what? They didn't even acknowledge each other for the most part, and I found out why. Because I asked, like, what are you talking about? You had so much in common. You were both displaced. You were lawyers and doctors. Now you were farmers. You had so much in common. But they said, the couple of survivors said, if I was walking down the street in Bialystok or wherever, and I saw a German guy walking down the street, Jewish or not, I wouldn't say I don't know if it's were whole different worlds. And it's a shame because they really had a lot in common, but they really lived in their own siloed communities. There was definitely German, and there was definitely, and of course Austrian as well, and the other Jewish people. Next slide, please. All right. Oh, I guess it's a little out of order, but that's fine. Okay, let's talk about the Robb family. Many of you, the Robb family, their legacy goes all the way from Cherry Hill and beyond to Sobibor and all the way down the shore. In fact, I was at Road of Shalom today, and I saw on the bima that it was dedicated the cover, the tapestry by the Robb family. Oh, you know that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Robb family because they were really fascinating story. So first off, Irving. He was 21 when Germany invaded Poland in 1939, forcing him into flight. He escaped east into the Soviet Union and survived through hard labor and skilled work. He dug ditches and later worked as a chemist and a mill supervisor, basically hiding in plain sight as a Russian, even though he was Jewish German. As the war spread, he retreated even further and east, traveling 1,000 miles into Russia, almost into Tajikistan and Siberia area. Each time adapting to each new danger, working in grain mills up until 1945. Crazy, amazing story. And that's not where it ends. His wife here, Esther Robb, at 17 years old, the Germans invaded and shattered her world. In 1939 December, her father was murdered along with SS execution of many Jewish men, while her brothers survived by feigning death. Her mother and her brother were forced into the Helm ghetto and later deported to the Helm straw labor camp in 1942. She was later sent to the Sobibor death camp. Selected for forced labor, she carried out a range of tests while secretly participating in the planning of a Sobibor revolt in October 43. During the uprising, she escaped into the woods and found refuge with a Polish Catholic farmer and was ultimately reunited with her brother. She moved to Vineland in 1951, not before marrying and meeting her beloved Irving. Now, next slide, please. Because her life wasn't over there. Even when they were together, they were recaptured a second time and escaped. It's an amazing story that's actually written in the book by Irving Robb, 99 Years, that's how long we live. A remarkable story, and it is quite a remarkable story. But Esther's where I want to focus because I absolutely love this picture. It's not in my book, but it will be in the next version because it's fantastic. Esther Robb, probably weighing about 110 pounds soaking wet, here pointing to the inmate of the Nazi Civil War concentration camp in Poland, Erich Bauer, the gas master at the camp. Remember, these individuals went on trial, and I love this picture. You can't really see, but she still has her handbag. She's still carrying her pocketbook. It was like, I can picture my own mother, like, him, like, it looks like there's momentum in the picture. It doesn't look stationary. And yeah, he's kind of hiding his face because he knows he's doomed. But you could tell in her eyes that feeling of, of yes, some sort of relief and some sort of closure, I hope. Anyways, next slide, please. Oh, cool. We're jumping into Miles Lerman, which, again, many of you might know as a local chicken farmer here. And his story is amazing. He was a teenager when the German invasion upended his life. He endured persecution, forced labor, constant danger under Nazi rule, beginning in a labor camp, the Niki labor camp, brutally deprived, routine beatings, and he escaped and spent nearly 2 years as a Jewish partisan in the forest, fighting a resistance unit that sabotaged German operations and sheltered other Jews. Partisans, without going into detail, there's dozens of different types of partisans. Some provided supplies, some literally were snipers in the woods, just trying to take out isolated bands of Nazis where they could shoot and guerrilla warfare, go back into the woods. They have their own amazing story, but we got well. Anyways, next slide about Miles. Okay, this is him in the displaced persons camp here, as well as later on in life. Next picture, please. There we go. So it was really after the war, he settled here in Vineland, New Jersey. He became the president and vice president of many of the local synagogues here in Vineland. But it wasn't until later on, I'd say the 70s and 80s, where he really started to take off and become a really important figure in Holocaust remembrance and memorial. He actually, if you've been in Beth Israel, he commissioned that enormous, I'll call it a diorama art sculpture that you can't miss. It's like 20 foot long with 3D. It's pretty moving. You could probably see it in 1 minute, but if you should spend at least 10 minutes looking at all the details I recommended, it's worth seeing. You see pictures here with Gazelle, the Pope, with the hard hat right in front of the opening of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. In the end, he raised close to $160+ million for the, we need one of those in our community, right? Oh no, that's all right. I'll schmooze until we get started again. But you're good. Well, we'll keep going. Anyways, so Miles Lerman, again, he helped raise $160 million. He's buried in much like the Robb family in the Alliance Cemetery in Alliance, New Jersey, about 8 miles or so from Vineland. So we're going to go back and we'll get the slide up in a minute. But basically, of Vineland, local, they had this incredible slide, which we'll show you in a little bit, of Vineland men led by Mayor Fell and Miles Lerman that are collecting 1,500 chickens from Vineland farms. They packed them in ice, froze them, and sent them onward to Lakewood, and then from Lakewood to Israel. And that's basically how they remain connected to Israel in their own way. They also in Vineland had what I would say is a work camp for individuals that were looking to move to Israel and make Aliyah. And Sons of Jacob would often have like going away parties. They would work, they would learn how to farm, they would figure out agricultural basics here before the stakes were high. And then later they would be able to get on a plane or maybe a boat and relocate and become Zionist farmers in the new state of Israel. All right, cool. You go one more if you can, or one forward. There we go. This is again Miles Lerman. He passed away at age 88. He's buried there with Chris Lerman. Her full name is Rosalie Chris. She's Jewish, just Chris' middle name, or what she went by in Poland. So next slide, please. Oh, this is what I was just talking about. So Joe Finkelstein's farm in Vineland in 1951, June. Holocaust survivors organized a local chicken collection. Why not? And I love this, like a cigarette thing, and it's such like a 1950s, like a farmer, like manhandling these birds and stacking them up. But again, it's just a way that the local community here was connected with Israel, the new state of Israel that was at that time only a couple of years old and having a lot of neighbor disputes. Next slide, please. Okay, so it wasn't all just, again, I didn't want to focus that it's not all prayer and synagogues and chickens and farm. There was a lot of fun things happening here in Vineland back in the day. A dance on Elmer Street between 6th and 7th. The grand opening of the Jewish Farmers Social Club. Sounds like fun, why not? The Jewish Farmer Entertainment to aid new growers. This was, they also had something called the New Americans Club, which is a great way to figure out who the Holocaust survivors were. They published all their names as part of the New American Club, and when they came in, and it's for research purposes, it's very helpful. So in the 50s, again, the number of Jews started to come in and increase. And next slide. And the poultry industry, it sounds crazy when people said the centerpiece is the chicken farms. Like, what? You know, what are you joking? Chicken farms were the backbone, as many as we know, of the evolution, the endurance of Vineland throughout the 1950s. Here we have 350 attended dance of the Jewish Farmers for Benefit Society, 600 attending the annual meeting. They made it so people, scientists would come in and talk about chicken diseases and how to best care for your chicken. This was an industry that was bringing in, I don't know exactly how much, it supported the entire town. If you weren't directly involved in the poultry industry, you were indirectly involved during this time. Next slide, please. All right, cool. So the Jewish poultry farmers, what they did was they actually sponsored something called the Maccabi, the Young Maccabis, which was there wasn't necessarily a summer camp here for Jewish kids. So this was an alternative, like a fitness club that they used to bring all the survivors' children together to exercise, do activities, kind of create a hero, a community. Next slide, please. All right, cool. And then came Hazel. For those of you that lived through it, you might remember it. It was way before my time. But Hurricane Hazel ripped through the region October 15th, 1954, and forced many residents into shelters, devastation in its wake, and one of the most powerful storms to ever strike the U.S. Mainland. It hit local Vineland farms hard. Chicken coops were flattened, dead birds littered on the ground, and thousands more were left without shelter or water, or diseased water, and would die in the near future. It didn't just blow down barns, it blew the lid off an already boiling pot of problems of local poultry farmers. I'll say that again, sorry. Hurricane Hazel didn't just blow down barns, it blew the lid off of an already boiling pot of problems for local poultry farmers. Egg prices had dropped, feed prices had risen artificially, and the storm was the final straw for many in the community. Some farmers literally sold the farm in the aftermath of Hazel. And many of the poultry farmers that were Holocaust survivors, this was their cue to move on to other pastures, let's say. Next slide, please. This is just some of the devastation, cleaning up some of the rubble. This was a former chicken coop, and as you can see, it's other than the cinder blocks, there wasn't a whole much left of it after the devastation of Hazel. It was a big turning point in Vineland history. Next, there you go, perfect, stay there. All right, but it wasn't all doom and gloom. There was still an industry, there's still so much Jewish history in Vineland happening. And in 1955, the Manischewitz Company, already known for nationwide as the largest year-round producer of kosher food, opened its new facility where? On Vineland's Delsey Drive. The site had previously housed a sweet potato packers and a less appetizing chapter of dog food manufacturer on the spot. But now it would produce something far more Hamish, jars of deep red borscht, destined for Jewish tables across the country. And almost overnight, it became a fixture of the collective imagination of American Jews. Manischewitz here in the Garden State. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where it was on Delsey Drive, as you can see the picture here. It soon added other offerings, specifically gefilte fish, and the lead up to Passover in March 1956. Manischewitz placed ads across the nation. This one is actually from California. You get up there and read it. It's weird angle. Here we go. Strictly fresh eggs exclusively from the famous Vineland, New Jersey egg farms, delivered right to the Manischewitz food plant in Vineland, where they are opened, inspected, and used, often in the same day that they are laid. I mean, that's quite fresh. That's some fresh matzo balls. But again, this was an ad that was happening here in Vineland, but was advertised in the Jewish papers all across the country. Next slide, please. Okay. So, anyways, again, the parallel to these Jewish poultry farmers were their children. Now, a lot of them growing into teenagers by 55, 56. A lot of them, this is the first, again, some of them born here in America. Looking at their age here, a lot of them might have been born in displaced person camps or being child survivors. Next slide, please. There we go. All right, so now the pace starts picking up. Vineland realizes we got a big Jewish population here. Beth Israel can't fit anyone anymore. We're going to need all these little, what they call mushroom shuls are popping up all over the place for all the small steeples. And they decided that we need a Jewish day school. And the groundbreaking ceremony, this is of the second incarnation, in April of 56. There was actually a first Jewish day school before the one that we know. And the groundbreaking over here, and some other individuals here, the Meyerfelds, and on the right, the Golokow family, who ended up moving to Atlantic City and opening up a hotel there. Next slide. So let's talk about the Jewish Community Day School. So to have a growing Jewish community, almost there's a checklist, even though it's unofficial. First, according to the Orthodox, you need a mikveh, and then you need a shul. And then to make it viable and continue and replenish itself, you're going to need a Jewish day school, where children ages pre-K through 8th grade can attend school amongst Jewish families and Jewish children, and create, and in addition to history, math, etc., would have topics about, Torah and modern Jewish thought and the state of Israel. This is the bottom is what the sketch of the original plan looked like. It looks enormous, doesn't it? It looks like it should be like a enormous warehouse, but in reality, this is what it ended up looking like on top. It's still there. It was converted into what I'll say is modest apartment housing. And it's in pretty decent shape now, but originally you might pass it every so often. It did have its roots as a Jewish day school. Next slide. And when it was a Jewish day school, again, they would, here's them celebrating Sukkot on the left and on the right as well. One in the old school and one in the new school on the right, a little more modern take. Next slide. All right, cool. So, yeah, this again, these are celebrating everything from Purim to Pesach, and it wasn't all joy, but it gave the Jews living in Vineland a place to really root down and know that their children and the next generation was taken care of. But it had its large share of issues. Next slide, please. Hit one more time. There we go. All right, not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5 times. I don't even know how many times, but at least a half dozen times that I know of. It was vandalized, set on fire at least twice. The old building was set on fire right after they moved out, and the new one in the middle of the night. Fortunately, no children were in the building at either time. It was ransacked. You can see in the upper right, kind of looking at an office that looks like someone went through it with malintent. And this was traumatic, not just obviously for obvious reasons, but these students and their parents were almost all Holocaust survivors. So this ripple really hit home and affected these individuals. So it didn't end well. Eventually, just so with the last fire, they never repaired that half of the building, and eventually they cut the building in half so they could actually heat or air condition that out, and then it closed in the late 70s. Next slide. All right, so again, I go up and down. Oh, sad story, happy story. Look at all this incredible industry that the Jewish families brought to this area. Most revolving, obviously, for the obvious, around chicken and eggs. When I say chicken, yes, some raised chicken for meat, but the egg industry was such a great turnaround where they were able to get their product quicker than growing a chicken for a year or two and selling. So some of the hatcheries here get your leghorns, expertly bred. In addition to all this, they would have what I'll say is scientists and veterinarians were thriving, people making chicken vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. It was big business. Vineland Kosher Poultry Company had a shul inside one of the meat packing plants where the Orthodox Jews would go home every Thursday through Sunday to celebrate Shabbat or observe Shabbat in Lakewood or wherever. And instead, the local Vineland workers created one inside the meat packing plant so they didn't have to go home. And that's in the book as well. It's one of the most odd but unique synagogues in Vineland area. Anyways, Arthur Goldhaft, I'm sorry, he had a laboratory is a big name as far as vaccines, Vineland Poultry Laboratories, and so on and so forth. Next slide. So now, throughout all of this, a number of people started to leave Vineland. and to realize this chicken farming was probably a stepping stone to a much larger world out there, whether it be in Atlantic City or in Bridgeton or maybe even in Millville. On the left, again, Harry Billicow and his Vineland Poultry Farm. He went on to own the St. James Hotel in Atlantic City, and his family's still there in Atlantic City. And the Ehrlich family on the right, which ended up being very, very big individuals in the Holocaust community, survivor community in Atlantic County, opening up the synagogue there on Mays Landing. And this is him selling his frozen vegetables that were actually raised in Bridgeton and selling them at a farm convention. So next slide, please. Okay, so hopefully many of you know who Meg O'Day is. And if you don't, you're going to remember her from this point. So Meg O'Day was the name of a prize-winning hen. And of all these, I'll say millions of chickens that went through Vineland, this is the one that stands out. And it's amazing. She's still preserved, and she's in the Philadelphia in the I might have notes here at the she's in the permanent collection at the National Museum of American Jewish History. She's stuffed or preserved, however you want to say it, freeze dried, I don't know. But she was a prize-winning hen. She exhibited at poultry shows 362 eggs in the year 1957. For those of you that don't know, I researched this. The usual is around 220 to 280 range. 300, you got yourself a good chicken. 362 is usually like is way on the high scale. Nowadays, with all the stuff that you do with it, science, maybe it's higher, but this is a huge deal. People actually on the right, this guy posing with it. People used to come in and take pictures with her. This chicken. It was like a thing. Come take a picture with Stern's chicken. So anyways, but it kind of just shows how ingrained this poultry culture was ingrained in Vineland life and also Jewish. Next slide, please. All right, cool. On the left is the family, Seth Stern's family. If you haven't read his book, I strongly encourage you to do so after you read mine. Seth, he's an amazing author. His research really helped me. I'll give him some props. This is his family on a Vineland farm. And again, with this farming, a lot of new developments evolved. One of them specifically being the way to incorporate kosher egg cleaning fluid, because of whatever they were using to clean the eggs, it was not highest level of kosher. So they created an alternative that was, as per rabbinical standards, kosher. They created these, what I'll call them, blinders or blockers for the roosters. You can come up with your own clever name for them. Some people can read my mind. But anyways, they used to block out other male chickens or roosters so they wouldn't fight and basically kill each other. Some interesting inventions outside of vaccines came out of Vineland as well. Next slide, please. Oh, and this is going to be fun. I think this is amazing. I wish this was my childhood. This looks like so much fun. The Poultry Festival was between, I'd say, really about 4 years or so in the mid-1950s. 1954 was one of the launch year. And basically, Vineland was known as the egg basket of America in the mid-1950s. And here we have this, I'll say, a 20-foot tall, enormous chicken that actually laid eggs. What it was is a guy in the back of the chicken with a stand. You walk over and he gives you a dozen eggs complimentary. So, but that was their shtick. It was the 50s, all right. It was before AI and all internet. This was cool, and I still think it's kind of cheesy. That can't be cool. Anyways, so they used to wheel this chicken out every year or two up to the late 1950s, and they used to parade it through the streets down Landis Avenue. Next slide, please. And this looks delicious, doesn't it? So they actually made I think it was called I don't have the ad here, but I have the ad somewhere. It's in the book, maybe. The Mammoth Egg Fry. And I don't think that sounds out. I think mammoth, like wool, hair, it's like, oh. And then the eggs. But basically, they had this enormous frying pan. And they would make I can't even say how enormous it was. It probably at least 15 feet in a diameter, circumference, diameter. Enormous omelet that they would make and then flip onto bread or sandwiches and with a fork, and people used to walk around and enjoy it. And I posted this picture online, and so many people were like, I was there, I ate from that. And then the conversation was, what did they do with the pan when they were done? And then people actually, it was amazing to have, this is what I'm taking notes. I'm like, yeah, tell me more. They were like, I went to another egg festival in another county, and it was the same pan. I don't know, that's not official history, but I think it's something worth tracking down. When did they finally melt this down to get its iron or whatever? But anyways, the omelet, the eggs, the poultry, these were, when I say primarily attended by the whole community, but a majority of the community that were attending and were involved in this industry were Jewish. So next slide, please. All right, cool. So this is, again, something I worked on in the book. This is actually a slightly older version, but basically trying to map out all the historic synagogues of Vineland. And there's about 10. Some of them are on here twice because they have multiple locations. And I think this is an older map. I think the newer one in the book actually might have more area. But you can see how close many, it looks close. And I did omit several streets, otherwise it would just be really messy. But you can see there, again, you have 1 Jew, 2 opinions. Here, you got a couple thousand Jews, you have about a dozen synagogues. And many of these synagogues were not what we consider like Beth Israel with stained glass and a bema. They were sheeples. It was someone's barn next to a chicken coop where they or sun porch where they used to meet for minyan. And so on and so forth. Some of them have incredible stories, from the one in the meat packing plant to one that started off as a barn. And guess what? Someone left the Shabbos candles on, of course, and got out of the barn. But the good news is that didn't end Jewish spirituality or Jewish life. It actually, that opportunity created an opportunity. We'll talk about it. Next slide. You're in first week. So click one more time. Okay, and one more time. And then last one. All right, so there we go. That was supposed to be 1, 2, 3. These were the 3 options. Again, in the early 1950s, when people arrived, you either, again, had very Orthodox, or conservative. And then, it started to develop, and Judaism became this, what I'll say is a ripened mosaic, a real conglomeration of cultures that came in from Europe, and it changed and grew and expanded beyond the Vineland river. Next slide, please. All right, so the next couple slides are what my passion project is. And this is what I went for my master's on and continuing on with my PhD, is studying these Holocaust survivors. And what the idea is that these were created by Holocaust survivors for Holocaust survivors. Yes, other people might have come and gone, but 95% were in this culture. This one is still there on Pine Avenue. It's right behind, there's a beautiful Mexican restaurant right in front of it, I want to say. It's a really bright yellow, and yeah. So this was so popular its first year in the mid-1950s that it filled up so far that people had to pray and daven outside for high holidays. And they would open the windows so everyone could at least hear the prayers and to pray outside. This is the official groundbreaking. A lot of Yiddish-speaking individuals with cool hats. But this wasn't the only one. This was one of the synagogues that diverged when that barn on Mill Road burnt down. So next slide. This is the other one. And you have probably driven past this a bunch of times. Shari Kapolei, which is actually Yiddish. It's basically, it talks about the Jews, it's the remnants. It's basically what it's loosely translated as. And it was for Jews that survived Hitler's wrath in order to live a day where they were free in a free world. And that was their philosophy. The original was not green. It's very simple, very Orthodox. When it closed, now it's a house of private residence. It was actually around the corner was the the drive-in, and even further was a horse farm where they used to do like horse shows. So in Seth Stern's book, he actually eloquently talks about, and I pick up some in mind, people used to walk to shul to the sounds of a movie playing and then horses neighing, and it wasn't the most zen atmosphere to go to shul, but it was action. There was people having the synagogues. What do you call it? Their bima and was transferred to a Hebrew academy in Yardley, PA. So it still exists. It's just it's there as part of the school. Next slide, please. This was again another Holocaust survivor shul. This was the Romanian, Hungarian. Again, the groundbreaking. It's now a house. You might have driven past it. It actually was for sale for $58,000. Unfortunately, someone sprayed on it. Sale $58,000. I have that picture. It's not as pretty as this one. But this is where the faces west towards Jerusalem. This is where the bima would be, so people would pray in this direction, facing Israel. And then in Israel, you face Jerusalem, and Jerusalem, you face the wall. And where you face the wall, it's a local call. Anyways, so again, this was a Russian, Hungarian, Romanian. Click one more time, please. And right around the corner, it's still there now. It's a church. Was the Sha'ar Tikva, which was the German Austrian. Again, if you go where these two synagogues are, it's probably from here to that corner. Again, this is the two, German and Russian, that are probably less than a city square block away. Totally different communities, both Holocaust survivors. Rarely, if ever, communicated. People write online like, I was at the other one, but I went to a bar mitzvah at this one. That was the only time I ever went in it. And that's great that they did that, but it was very rare. Next slide, please. Anyway, so now also in the 1950s, I didn't mention, but Beth Israel also went through in 1950 a tremendous period of growth. They have this gorgeous stained glass I have to show here. When you've heard, this is enormous. If you've ever been in Beth Israel, you know that this piece of stained glass is probably floor to ceiling. It's enormous. And this picture is not very beautiful here, but it's actually stuck here, and this is just reflection on the floor. How cool is that? So I think it's great. It's obviously Mount Sinai. In the picture, there's no letters or loose letters on the commandments, and just kind of floating up there. Stained glass is another thing. So, anyways, next slide. This is great. So these are, again, Holocaust survivors walking a Torah to their new synagogue, Sharit HaPolei, the one that was the remnants. So Seth Stern's father's in one of these pictures. I'm not sure which one he's one of the people holding the sticks. But they're transferring the Torah under what's a chuppah, which is basically when you get married as a Jew under a chuppah. It's a religious, it's symbolic, and that's the way they shielded the Torah as they left into the new city. This might just look like a normal scene, but think about this picture. Everyone in this picture was a survivor of Nazi Germany, who were in concentration camps, displaced citizen camps, and now are in America, in Vineland of all places, 15 years after the Holocaust, carrying a Torah into their synagogue. So I find that this one of the pictures I find really inspirational in the slide, and I put it front center of the book because it was moving me. Next slide, please. All right, cool. So we're going to kind of wrap up in the next couple of minutes. We're going to kind of go through the last kind of timeline of Vineland. And again, it started slightly to decline. People started to move away. And these are just some of the news that was happening in the 1960s, not just in Vineland, where the Manischewitz factory was still thriving, or at least sustaining itself. Jewish Agricultural Society would send the farmers' children, Jewish farmers' children, make sure they had a chance in the world and went to college. And the subsidiary was also the Baron de Hirschfeld, which is a whole different story if you want to learn about Jewish woodbine, maybe another time. And then also some of the things Sandy Koufax, obviously, won't mention, nothing to do with Vineland, but oh God, everyone knows that's such a great story. But Jews were getting more recognition. Their rules, the regulations regarding Shabbat and what they can and can't do were in the public eye. The slaughter bill, that they deemed it was unkosher to kill animals in a kosher style because it was cruel, and it became a court case. Blue laws on Sundays, where stores were not allowed to open on Sundays, and the Jews couldn't open their shop on Saturday, and now they couldn't open on Sunday. It was a big thing that the Jews had to rally together as a community to kind of claim their stake and to make sure that they had a fighting chance. They were done being walked over, and these are some of the instances of that. So next slide, you can save 6%, by the way. I'm going to show you. Mid-1960s, okay. So basically at this point, we're looking at the Six-Day War in Israel. You see the date of this, just 67, yeah, we're right on track. Six-Day War was happening in Israel. Israel's attacked by, from all sides, all at once. And I loosely believe in miracles, but I believe the Six-Day War is the closest thing we've seen in our lifetime to a miracle. Not only the fact that Israel survived, but they thrived. That is insane and something in biblical proportions as far as the victory in the Six-Day War. It could have been done without our Vineland people. Be at Beth Israel Synagogue Sunday night, prepared for the biggest, most important charity trek of your lifetime. You think, I don't know, it's in the bottom here. I don't know if my board would like it if I did that, but get ready to write that check with the biggest amount we need to save Israel. They're under attack. And on the right here, you see a lot of the women who started to take more and more ownership roles of leadership, whether it be Hadassah, B'nai B'rith, and so on and so forth. They started becoming more confident in their Americanization. And it's a transition I noticed in the research, and as I research all these people who are long gone, their women are often named by their husband's name. So we like Mrs. Joel Schwartz, and Mrs. Chaim Botai, and on my end, I don't accept that. I actually go back and I do my best, and not perfect, to find out their names, even if I have to go to the cemeteries. Because I think as a historian, it's great we know who they are, but we need to bring history up to 2026 and beyond. So with that said, the women became more and more involved in synagogue life and planning, and this is just one shot of that as well. Next slide, please. Remember, it was the 60s, okay? And again, this is now the 60s and this is in sisterhood of a Jewish music festival, a violent organization from Jewish Community Council, and they planned for a ceremony for Jewish victims. I mean, this is before Yom HaShoah, the day of the disaster, the Yom HaShoah, and basically they put one of the first early monuments right here in Vineland Cemetery. Sorry, not Vineland Cemetery, in Lion Cemetery. It's a tree stump with a bunch of broken off branches, with the idea that these were individuals whose lives were cut short, much like a chopped off branch of a tree. It's still there. It's in the center. If you go to the Lion Synagogue, you can go there too. The Lions, the roundabout in the middle of the cemetery, it's there. So, with a plaque. So, anyways, the Holocaust became more and more talked about. People in the 60s eventually started telling their story, not quite like 80s, 90s, which but the confidence of safety in numbers and individuals that started to be buried together in the Lion Cemetery, the Jews that were Holocaust survivors, started writing their own memoirs on their tombstones, mostly in Hebrew, sometimes in Yiddish, occasionally in English. Some of them was said, so-and-so's buried here, and memorial to these 8 people of my family that died and don't have a place that died in the Holocaust. Some I'm doing more research in a base landing area, they have some, what I'll say is a whole paragraph just trashing the Nazis. On their tombstone, like, damn those bastards, I'll never forgive them. And it's like, oh, this is amazing. And what I'm finding in my research is not only is incredibly interesting, and with AI, you can just take a picture and it translates Yiddish in like 10 seconds. It's amazing. Couldn't do that 5 years ago. The trend is that the people who died in the 50s and 60s on their tombstones, it barely has anything. Come into the late 60s, early 70s, they used to have Holocaust survivor. Then 70s, 80s, there's a whole paragraph about their survival story to make sure that no one ever. And that takes place in Base Landing, where my primary research is, as well as Vineland, which is, I guess, secondary research. Next slide, please. All right, cool. Oh, cool. This is basically, if you haven't seen it, we talked about it earlier in Israel, the diorama sculpture. It's about, I'd say, close to about 20 foot long. If I had to guess, it's probably the length of this room, and it's enormous. It was commissioned by Hans Lerman, who we talked about earlier in 1975, and it's still there. Eventually, who knows if hopefully that Israel's there forever. If not, I'm hoping that it will eventually be moved to Stockholm University, whether in one of their campuses. It belongs on display. Next slide, please. Almost at the end. All right, cool. So throughout all these Jewish, this is almost like in conclusion, almost at the end here. Throughout all this Jewish history, it didn't happen in a vacuum. Okay, we're talking about poultry farmers, we're talking about synagogues, day schools getting burned down, Russian immigrants mixed with German immigrants. It all took place against the Americana background that many of you grew up with, against whether it be the Landis Theater, the Delsey Drive-In, or some of these other shopping centers behind the high school. These, it did not happen in a vacuum. This story, this Jewish story, happened in tandem, parallel with Vineland's own Americana story. Next slide. All right, this is almost the end. So, in conclusion, my boss looks at me, everyone pays attention when you say in conclusion. So, in conclusion, we are wrapping up this fantastic presentation. Although the Jewish farming in Vineland has come and gone, it still echoes in the fields. I still get that spiritual buzz when I go around and through these farmlands to know that these were the locations of the people that I look up to and I read about and write about and research. This is their homes, and this is it. So even though, to be honest, I've never lived in Vineland. I'm from Cherry Hill, and then I moved to the Margate. I feel a real spiritual connection to the farmlands of Vineland, obviously for a variety of very important reasons that I talked to today. So with that being said, I don't even know if I hopefully didn't go too far over, but I want to thank you so much for your attention, and with the idea that if you enjoyed this, we could talk in the future. I have tons of other programs ranging from the Lost Synagogues of the Pine Barrens, through Atlantic City, through Wildwood Jewish businesses, through Vineland-owned businesses. I can come back another time. I love it. This is a great place to have a presentation. I feel like I'm in situ, which is like a good word. You know, it's like you're in the place. You're actually having the program in the location. I will give one last plug. June 4th, it's a Thursday. June 4th, I will be at 6 p.m. at the Alliance Cemetery and the mural there. That's in Pittsgrove Township. We're going to be doing a 6 o'clock tour of the cemetery, depending, and the new mural there, which is fantastic. And then at 7 o'clock, I'm going to be doing this same, well, I'll be at a different podium, different lecture, but the idea that I'll be focusing entirely on the synagogue and the early Jewish pioneers of Vineland, of Alliance, Norwalk, Rockville, Rosenhaven. So June 4th, and yeah, thank you for your attention. I'll stick around for questions, if that's okay. Yes. I don't mind throw them at me, people. And I think I would actually rather hear you talk than me, because many of you live this, and I'm just learning about it from newspaper articles, interviews, and archives. So yeah, any questions or anything? Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I have a question. Seeing all the history you just brought forth, it seems like a lot of the Jewish families, you know, when they had children, sent their kids away from father. Yeah. That was the main thing. I know when I was brought up, my parents said, when you get out of high school, you're out of Holland, you're not coming back. And that was, we lost a lot of good resources.
Yeah.
Do you have any feeling about why that happened? Why
you know, you're absolutely right with that assessment, and it is true. that many times in my writing and reading, the word stepping stone comes up. With the idea that these individuals were back in the old world, lawyers, doctors, musicians, watch fixers, whatever. And now they're scooping chicken coop. And they saw the bigger picture out there, not only in their lives before they got to Vineland, but also could see through Americanization that was rapidly changing so fast that the only way to break this chain and get their kids out of this was to send them to college, maybe through one of those Jewish Agricultural Society or scholarships. I wish they were still around. And to get them a trade, a job, some brain power, and then eventually, yeah. But yeah, I think the Vineland Jewish community obviously stayed active through the 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000s. From what I'm gathering, like in Atlantic City, it was that early 2000s hit around 2007, 8, when everyone lost a lot of money and everyone just kind of downsized and moved away. At least that's in the Atlantic City area. Here, I think it happened a little sooner. But yeah, I think it was the idea that first generation of American-born Jews, their parents didn't want them scooping the food, for lack of better words. And it was a good, honest living. But again, it became harder and harder to have a living as a Jewish chicken farmer as the 50s turned into the 60s, and the profit margin was reduced, and there was more competition. And it wasn't just the trains transporting stuff in the 40s and 50s. Now it was buses and trucks. Okay, become the 50s. It wasn't just all train travel like it was in the glory early days. But they still survived for decades after the crash of the poultry industry. But the parents, it's like my own parents. I'm the son of a butcher. As a fun fact, from Cherry Hill, we have the prime shop, prime meats, gourmet treats. And my dad made me work as a butcher for 2 summers, and it was the absolute worst job I've ever had. I couldn't feel my fingertips by 8. I started at 6 in the morning, cleaning the chicken troughs. By 8 a.m., I couldn't feel my fingertips at all, and it was horrible. To the point where I actually wore gloves, like to hold the chicken because I couldn't feel my fingertips. That was enough for me to say I'm going to college. So I think maybe it was the same philosophy of you want to do this the rest of your life, or just look what so-and-so is doing. There's a pathway for you to aspire. And many of them, at least down the shore, in market, almost all of our big synagogues are all named after Holocaust that became huge. The Schofer Holocaust, the Sarah Sam Schofer Holocaust Resource Center in Stockton. The Gerwitz building is in Bethel, and so on and so forth. Not all, but many of them have the Simon Jewish Family Service Center, and so on and so forth. They really went above and beyond the second generation, or only the first generation, and it was a work ethic. I don't know, maybe some of you are children of survivors, that was instilled in a lot of these individuals to aspire, to dream big, aspire higher, work more, get goal driven. And it worked. Not everyone, but a lot of people ended up making a lot of money and were the owners of the execs of a lot of the casinos down in Atlantic City, and the owners of a lot of hotels in the day. So yeah.
Rabbi College in Vineland helped his daughter, teacher at Memorial School, helped his son, his grandson, as a student. Rabbi Cohen survived absolutely. He made a statement. There's a difference between murder and killing. And my father's in the Pacific. It kind of helped me. They could murder Marine say something very similar to me. At the cemetery, to tradition, because it's forever, putting a stone. But it seemed like, and I don't mean to be negative enough, it almost seemed like there were so many stones ran like Holland that it was like a tractor trailer instead of an individual. Like up at West Point, the Sunday school teacher and I was kind of surprised. She had a fair number of stones, but you can see it out, whereas, is that typical or?
And that might be based on individual, maybe it was a very popular,
Yeah, very popular.
yeah, so they might have just been,
Just
and
somebody
might have been one individual person that was like, I love this guy. You know, who knows? But I only do one at a time because that's really all you need, just to show you were there, and it lasts longer than flowers, and it's more symbolic and connected to tradition.
And it's cemetery, and I don't read Hebrew, I didn't go and read English. But any estimate, wild educated estimate, on how many people survived the whole other hurry?
I don't know the number of people. I actually have an old map of the lines of the cemetery, who's very rare. And I posted it online. I don't know the exact number. But I will say, as part of this, my master's program, the Stockton Holocaust Resource Center has created the South Jersey Holocaust Project. I'm probably saying it wrong. I apologize. Where they are creating a massive database of all the Holocaust survivors that's moved to South Jersey, even if it was just for a couple of years, even if it was later in life. And they have a list. It was, when I was there years ago, 1,500, and now it's over 1,800, almost 2,000 names that are of survivors that ultimately moved to Vineland, Atlantic City area. Specifically Vineland, I'm not sure, but I will say the South Jersey area absorbed 2,000, approximately 2,000 Holocaust survivors, and that's just Atlantic, Cumberland, and Cape May. There were still, Salem had its share, as well as Gloucester County, not as much in Gloucester. They were very spread out as far as the synagogues in Gloucester. But yeah, but that was the statistic, was officially at least 1,800 moved here. How many are buried in Alliance, I don't know, but you know, a lot of them are. And if you've ever been to Alliance Cemetery, you've seen the, hopefully the Holocaust Memorial monument that's there, that was dedicated by Esther Robb, as well as Rabbi Murray Cohn, right? Yeah, I think he was one of the main funders and catalysts behind it as well. And it is moving. It is a pretty special place. It's very serene. Yeah, to be inside there. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if it's still out there or available. Probably like 40 years ago, I graduated from high school at Richard Rock.
Okay.
Made a film.
Yes.
I didn't see it.
It's on YouTube. I believe it's on YouTube. There's a film created by Richard Brotman, who is the ancestor of the Brotman family, Aaron Brotman, and so many other Brotmans. That basically, quick version, he created outside of Alliance a factory, shirt factory, and employed Jewish families with the idea that he was giving them a livelihood and a way to earn a living. And he looked like the kingpin, but it was described as, you know, this serenity and farm, but it was really a lot of sweatshops, basically. But his descendant created a film. I don't even know when. I'm assuming in the 70s or 80s.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he interviewed a number of chicken farmers that have been there for a number of years that are probably long gone. But yeah, you can see it on YouTube. It's that some of the pictures of the Brotman synagogue, the only color pictures I have of the synagogue, I screenshotted from that film. That's in the book. It's a you know, it's preset, and I took it because all the pictures that were there before it was torn down, most of them, not all of them. Yeah, I think that the one of the premise, I think that film, they have like a reunion at some point in the film as well, where it's like like a jubilee, like it's 50 years and then 100 years, and now we're up to, I mean, we're looking at approximately 140 years since, if we go 1881, I'm going to use I'm embarrassing myself with that, but about 140-ish years, we'll say, that the Jewish community has been here in Vineland and its extended family, I'll say. Just so you're aware, in Alliance, they actually are trying something called Alliance Reboot. It's a clever name, ACRE, Acre, but it's AC Alliance Colony Reboot. It's a bunch of
I'll say, idealistic kind of, I'm not gonna say hippie, but easygoing, very sweet individuals who are working to bring back this idea of Jewish farming. It's a descendant of Moses Bayuk and Ihar Levine, who are huge of the day, and they created a mural and they're trying to reinvigorate the farming industry, Jewish farming. I don't know if it's succeeding. I know they got some good grants, but I don't keep tabs on their artists, but I don't know. Maybe there's a future. Who knows? If not, it's still an interesting comeback. So, any other questions? Sure. Yeah, the back.
Question. Hi, I'm Tanya Cohen. I work for Josh with the butcher store.
Yeah.
The uncle from Vineland where my family is, and they're actually, I would say, one of the few people that registered currently at the Vineland Hebrew Cemetery, the only Jewish cemetery in Vineland. I know a lot about Hawaiian.
Yeah.
So my niece and I recently visited, and we discovered the rest of our family was there. We're probably about 10 to 20% of the cemetery that's left. It's pretty all land.
Yeah, it's right on.
There's not much, there's like 2 light colors.
Yeah.
We were there recently. We actually, we want to fix it up, but it recently was required by the Jewish Federation and they don't know anything about it.
Let's do this. As part of my job,
Put it out there.
yeah, please. I don't know how you follow me. As part of my job in the BJE, not to harp on this, but we had one of our cemeteries that was so bad that there was a homeless encampment in it. And we rallied the community to come and clean it up. We had about 25 people show up with the little pinchers, and the police came to help and for security, but also to kind of chip in. So I am all about that. It's one of those things where I believe that the people that I wrote about in this book, part of the buzz I got from writing it was bringing them their stories back to life, and then visiting them at their cemeteries and seeing it in really disheveled, really, I'll call it piss poor conditions was really hurtful and disheartening. So I am there. If you can find out, I know that I can work with you on to get that launch. I'm definitely happy.
And
to
that,
make
I
that.
will say, my great grandfather was a founder of this show.
Very cool.
One of my board members, and I don't know if the building's sold, they don't own it anymore.
It's its own, and the Beth Israel rents out a corner of it right now. Yeah.
Despite the Brown family thing off the mortgage, which they're not even telling me that. And I would love to learn more about that synagogue as well. I've been trying to buy the book about it and whatever.
Oh, they have.
I can get it.
It's really the same lady who wrote a book about it. It's pretty cool. Yeah, reach out to me. I'd be happy to. I have something planned for October in Shabbat Ayam and Ventnor. Their cemetery. I'm going to put 1 or 2 more on the calendar. I'd love to reach out and have Vineland part of it. So yeah, I know the exact Kirk Weismeyer, so I work with Kirk, so I can reach out to him possibly or other people.
Yeah, because I'll say the Federation's like, we just got a box of stuff. We don't know anything about it. You want to come up with the box?
Yeah,
And there's
that's how the book started. It was like, here's the box, and I'm there taking pictures of them.
Cemetery and Jewish ritual burial, they're the ones who are taking over. We're looking for deeds, we're looking for site maps, because we're gonna be, Hank Earl is the guy who's in charge of that, he's getting very old now.
Oh, you're being talked
So we're trying to get we're trying to get all that information, the fabrication, which is based out of Alliance, has all of that, and we're trying to get a database going. And that also, Kirk, if you know Kirk, and myself, Jane, Barbara over there in the front row on the Federation board and the rest of the fabric.
So we're making progress on that.
We're trying to get that into digitized, and we're trying to figure out who the management would be, how it would be. It's a grades, the land, there's a lot of stuff on our yes.
I have a.
So we're making progress. So this was a productive meeting, and if myself or my group, for lack of better words, can be part of it, or even make a flyer, promote it. the leadership behind it, it's high mission for me on a personal level to fix these things up. So, yeah. Any other questions? I will say, if you're interested, I do have some books available for sale. Come on over. I'd be happy to sign them for you. The full color, 248 pages, lots of pictures that you see, all 70 snake eyes, and yeah, lots of interesting stories. I have a good chance your family's probably in here. You have something else to say? I don't want to cut you off.
I just want to know if anybody on Zoom had any questions.
Okay, sure.
I'm sorry,
It's
for
okay.
Josh.
I'll stick
Yes.
around.
Is there anybody on Zoom that had any questions or comments for Josh?
Lots of positive comments. They said, thank you so much for being here and how much they really
My
enjoyed the
pleasure.
presentation.
No, this is great. And like I said, I'm touring South Jersey, so Woodbine, Vineland, Alliance, on the road.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.